Hello, Christopher S. Duncan here. I'm going to be building a new computer system today in this existing tower, which I've taken everything out from the old Windows XP technology that was in there. I'm going to be putting in a BioStar TA970 motherboard with an AMD FX processor, the FX 4300. I'm going to put in 8 gigabytes of Vengeance RAM, DDR3. Pull it in, put in a CoolMax 500 watt power supply, a PNY graphics card, a GT610, and a Asus DVD rewritable. First thing you want to do is put in the power supply. CoolMax 500 watt power supply. Get the first screw in. The rest of them will line up nicely. Once you get the two opposite corners in, the rest comes easy. Once you get the last one in, you can tighten it down all the way and then tighten the rest of the screws down all the way. And they're in there nice and good. Go ahead and untwist tie the cables. Put these up and over the case and out of the way for the rest of the install. Going to install the 500 gigabyte SATA hard drive. Just put it in here for now. Get it out of the way. Now that I have the drive in, I'm going to go ahead and open the Asus CD rewritable. You put it in this really nice bubble material. Comes with the driver disc. Now this one had a drive in here already, so you'll see that there's the opening inside there. So this drive actually can enter from the front. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and take screws that I have for the drives. Go ahead and come over here and secure the hard drive in place right here. Leave a little space in the front so there's airflow. Magnetic tips help get it started. Always keep at least one finger on the chassis at all times. Human body does carry a slight amount of voltage. It can short out sensitive components. Anyway, so we get the screws in. Just wash, rinse, and repeat for all the holes in this side. Make sure you have the front of the drive flush with the front of the case. Up in the front here. Okay, now we're ready to install the motherboard. The BioStar TA970 motherboard is an AM3 Plus socket motherboard, and it's Windows 8 ready. TA970 motherboard from BioStar comes with a faceplate, 2 SATA cables, an encased motherboard with a socket AM3 Plus for an appropriate FX processor from AMD. When handling a motherboard, you want to be grounded. So the best thing to do is use a grounding strap, or to ensure that you are grounded with a mat, like I am, or use be sure to touch the case at all times when you're handling. In the user's manual for the motherboard will be things like pinouts for the power and the LED, what sockets RAM should be used in pairs in. It also comes with a driver CD, basic driver CD to get you started. You get your operating system loaded, then you download the latest motherboard drivers and flash the BIOS with the latest changes. One of the most important things you should do is make sure that you have the faceplate for the motherboard on and ready to receive the pieces of the motherboard that poke through the back. The ones you know well, like the USB ports, the sound, or the speakers that you may have. These must line up with the faceplate we just put in. Holes in the motherboard must line up with the holes in the risers below. And you got the holes lined up. Once you get it set in place, then you just get your screws out. How many holes I have lined up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 holes, 5 screws. You can use a magnetic tip screwdriver to lower it down into the motherboard, onto the motherboard. Do not touch the motherboard with the tip. Once again, make sure you're grounded. Motherboards sometimes do not come with screws. This one did not. Same thing for the drives. I had to have my own screws, which I do have some that I've collected over the years. Once you get it a little started, should be good to go. Tighten down the rest of the screws. And now you see that the motherboard is in place. It's nice and solid. It's not going anywhere. You can see the ports are lined up. I can. Voila, motherboard is in. Now it's time to install the CPU. Never handle the CPU with your fingers. The oils in your hands will destroy it. If you must touch it with your fingernail only. Once it clicks into place, below the arm, underneath the little plastic retaining ring right there. Next is the heatsink. You notice the gray area right there, it's got a silicone material to help seal to the top of the CPU. Turn it over, this is the fan. It goes down on the CPU. Look at the instructions carefully to make sure you place it correctly down. Because once that gray material hits the top of the CPU, you do not want to remove it. Line this clip over here with this part on the motherboard. Line this part right here with this part on the motherboard. And then rock the lever back so it applies pressure to the top of the CPU. Voila, the fan is in place. As with all OEM installations, you must make sure that this label for the CPU is affixed to the external case so that it is known what CPU is running inside the case. Now that we have the power supply, the DVD rewriter, and the hard drive in place, and the CPU with its fan secured on the motherboard, we can now continue to put the other add-on components into the computer. This will include the 2x4 Gigabyte RAM chips for a total of 8 gigabytes. Will include a video card, and that will complete our internal construction. But then we go into the wiring phase, which is a little bit more complex. Now I'm going to install the Vengeance 8 gigabytes of RAM. You see on here it actually indicates that it's a 2x4, so it's part of a package. Remove it from the plastic container. Once again, these components are damaged easily by skin oils, so hold it by the outer cooling case. Anytime you touch human oils to the metal components anywhere, it degrades performance over time. What I need to do is put this in A1 and B1. Right here on the motherboard it says DDR3A1. It's in order of top to bottom. So A1 and B1 are the two black slots. Rock the little pins back. Now you see I'm going to have to turn this around. There's grooves in there, so you turn this around. So we're going to do that again. Snap, snap. It's a groove, a slot that you have to get the bottom portion in, so you can tilt it a little bit to get it shaken in there. Once it's in there, tap like that, you know it's straight. Little pressure, snap, snap. Next project is the video card. I'll go ahead and install it. In this case, I have the P&Y graphics card. It is a GeForce GT610, 1GB DDR3. Come in a really nice plastic container. Recycle if you can. And then you'll note on most cases there are little metal pieces that cover the slots. Typically you just bend them slightly, which you can't see in this image. Just bend them slightly back and forth. Make sure the bottom portion of it clears any resistors or capacitors or whatever on the motherboard. In this case I've got good clearance. And then it just kind of snaps off. Now once again, because it's an electronic component, you want to make sure you're grounded. PCIe X16 graphics card helps secure it in place at the top edge of the graphics card. Okay, it is solidly in place. Now the graphics card does come with an installation disk, which I will use to get it set up initially, and then of course we'll go to Windows Update and make sure that all of the updates are in place. Okay, at this point it's recommended to go ahead and hook up all of the fans. In this case we have the CPU fan. CPU fan 1 right here. This will allow BIOS to manage the clock speed if the BIOS is compatible with doing so, and if the CPU is compatible with doing so, which I believe is not in this particular model. But nonetheless, you need the fan going. So what you see here is detailed information on how it's going to go on the motherboard. And you see the location pointed out right here on the motherboard, which is very nice. I usually use the RAM slots as far as direction on the motherboard. We do have all of the little power LED, the power switch, HDD LD, and the reset switch. The HDD LED pin 1 goes to the left just like the other one did. How you tell pin 1 is there's a little arrow on the device itself. These pinouts on the motherboard are complex and should be done by a trained professional like S Duncan at chris-services.net. So the 3 remaining are the power LED, which this case does not have a power LED, which is fine. This is the main power for the motherboard. It only goes one way. You cannot force it to go any other way. However, you can destroy the motherboard if you're not really careful on exactly how this goes in there. Plugging into this like that. The main power is now in place, and we are ready to move on to the next thing. Rapid fire succession, what we're going to do is we're going to start plugging in devices with power. Standard power model X. Once that's plugged in, the power will come on. Okay, we have SATA drive power. This is a SATA hard drive. It requires SATA drive power. And we're going to lean over, plug it up. There's only one way it can go, but you can damage it if you're not careful. So be visible. Make sure it's visible. There it goes. There you go. Plugs in nicely. Okay, now we got to find a SATA cable for power for the DVD rewritable. I'm using the longer one because I can have more space up here in which I can wrap power cables. Line it up, reach down, plug it in. Okay, we have power. That is the only 2 external devices. The rest is cables that need to be managed inside the case. There is no IDE port on here, so I cannot plug in this person's old hard drive. I've already made a copy of the profile. So we are pretty much done, except that we now need data cables. Well, luckily, Motherboard came with its own SATA cables. So what you need to do is look at the motherboard or look at the motherboard book, determine which SATA port is the first port. SATA 1 is right over here in this corner. There's only one way that can plug in. There's kind of an L shape to it. So I plug it right into the board. Like I say, hold the side of the board, push it in, you heard it snap. So we put this one right here. I'm going to put the excess cable around the side on the bottom of it. Make sure that the angle is correct. Get the L shape in there. It's a shorter L shape than the power. And you heard it snap in. Once again, we have the DVD rewritable. It also needs to go to a SATA port. Recommending SATA 2. Which is right next to it, next to SATA 1. Plug it into the L shape. Boom, snap. Stretch it up to the top of the case. This mid-tower case is fairly good. Requires most of the functionality that a modern case needs. And once again, you get the L shape, plug it in, snap. Okay, so now what we've done, we've installed the hard drive, which is a 500 gigabyte SATA 3, I believe. And then we have a DVD rewritable by Asus. It is plugged in with power, SATA power, and SATA cable, SATA data. We have installed the RAM, Vengeance 4 gig times 2, so it's 8 gig. It is seated in place nicely because the little levers are up. Same thing with the video card. It's seated in place nicely because this lever is up. You push it down and eject the card. If you push it back, push the card back down, it'll snap that little lever up. So make sure if you ever nudge the case and you have a video problem, just make sure that this isn't, shaken loose, in which case it caused the video card to come unseated. Now, CPU took a little bit more. You had to align it to the right, to the correct side. The arrow faces a very specific direction. You have to look at the manual that comes with it very closely to find out which corner it goes into. It probably will not go any other way, but I have not tested that theory. CPUs are too expensive. Once again, we placed the motherboard in here, fastened it down with screws in the locations that we could. In this case right here, I had to use a rubberized support, because there is no hole in the case for a screw to go through. But you have to have something under there. So a little bit rubberized, and you'll note that I have this case propped up a little bit while I'm working on it. That's why it's been rocking some. The reason why I have it propped up with a rubber tool is because there's a little nub sticking out the back of this, which will turn over and clip with some wire snips, scissors or something like that. Okay, everything in place. Motherboard, power supply. It's a 500 watt power supply. We will not come close to that with this configuration. This motherboard is small, the components few. The ATX case fairly standard, and everything is good. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to get some zip ties or some Velcro straps. I'm going to make sure that these power cables are off the motherboard, out of the airflow paths. Okay, so I've taken the straps, Velcroed them up, so it's a nice organized mess. I'm going to pull this Molex out just a tad bit, tuck it in right here underneath the DVD rewritable, because I want this Molex to be available for the case fan that is mounted on the side of the case that goes right here. Plenty of room. Now I'm going to take another Velcro strap, and you see all of these cables hanging loose. You don't want them hanging too loose. Go around the straps. Sometimes you might have to undo and retuck other things. The reason why I'm not putting it up right here is because there's a fan right here that sucks air through the power supply. You don't want to obstruct the view of that, the path of the air in that. You could use zip ties, but zip ties sometimes pinch into wiring, cause effects that will be more long term, but Velcro straps are very safe. And it won't get hot enough for them to be a problem anyway in here. Okay, so now we have the straps in. We have connectors. We want to go back through and check to make sure we didn't jar them loose when we were messing with the connectors. The SATA cables as well as the power connectors. There's not very many. In this case, 2, 4, 5. 5 connections. This configuration is really kind of efficient. Have regular standard screws, case screws, and the one down south.
Now flip the computer over to put the final case cover on.
This case, I'm going to go ahead and find the Molex I had pulled out, plug it into the fan Molex. You'll see that this cone right here is situated right over the CPU, so it provides extra airflow right above the CPU. Very well designed fan in that regard, or case in that regard. So incidentally, all right, very well. We have now completed the physical setup of this computer. Once we finish putting the case together, we have an abundance of tools. We need tools and little screws we need to put back together. Have I ever come across not having a screw I need? No, not really, not in years, because these screws, there are some screws in this collection that date back to the 90s. So you know that the technology that holds things together don't change as often as you might think. Most of these screws right here are fairly new from systems that I put together maybe the last few times. And this little tube is awesome for holding a lot of them. You want to keep your screws and your bits and all that stuff in your mobile kit as tightly wrapped up as possible. You never know when you're going to be called out the door on a quick job, where the position or the situation will benefit everybody involved. Mainly and especially, it's good to be there as soon as they call, so you don't have to be doing all this when you're sitting in front of them. It's going to make you look even more impressive when you're there saving the day. There's your mobile kit. You are ready to go. Now, for this, we have the software to install the hardware, the motherboard book for reference. We are good to go. Okay, once the hardware is installed, it is time to install the software. We'll start with the Windows 8.1 operating system, which I have, and I've already put in the drive, and it's ready for power up. I'm going to reach over and flip the power switch on, and then push the power button. I have drive light activity. But first I go into BIOS by pushing the delete key. As soon as the screen comes up, GeForce GT 610, and I'm hitting delete. You heard the speaker, it does work. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is change the date in the system. Today's date is 4/30. Use plus minus keys. Right arrow key to the next screen, which is the advanced PCI subsystem settings. You see that it sees the legacy ROM, 32 PCI bus clocks. Change that to 64-bit. Everything in here is 64-bit compatible. We're going to go to the boot priority. I'm going to set it SATA ASUS, which really I want to go first. And then I want to select the SATA hard drive as the second boot option. The third is disabled because we won't need that. It is recommended to put an administrator password into the BIOS. I want to go ahead and check to make sure that we are seeing everything. It shows all 8 gigabytes of DDR3 set at 1333. Okay, I'm going to save and exit configuration.
I installed Windows 8 and rebuilt the user profile and installed his custom programs. Watch for a separate video later for that portion. Please visit chris-services.net to get a system custom built for you from scratch today. Thank you for watching this video.